Vasishta's Yoga, Part 4 on Sustenance, the story of Dāma, Vyāla, and Kaṭa. Vasishta continued, O Rama, in the great empire known as Dreadful Hell, evil actions roam like mighty elephants in rut. The senses which are responsible for these actions are equipped with a formidable magazine of cravings. Hence, these senses are hard to conquer. These ungrateful senses destroy the body, their own abode and support. However, one who is equipped with wisdom is able to restrain craving without injuring the being, even as a noose restrains the elephant without harming its being. The bliss enjoyed by the wise man who has his senses under control is incomparably superior to the enjoyment of a king who rules over a city built with brick and mortar. The former's intelligence grows in clarity as his craving for sense pleasure is worn out. However, the craving disappears completely only after the supreme truth has been realized. To the wise, the mind is an obedient servant, good counselor, able commander of the senses, pleasing wife, protecting father, and trustworthy friend. It impels him in good actions. Rama, be established in truth and live in freedom in a mindless state. Behave not like the demons Dāma, Vyāla, and Kaṭa, whose story I shall presently narrate to you. In the nether world there was a mighty demon known as Sambara. He was a past master in the art of magic. He created a magic city with 100 suns on the horizon, walking and talking beings made of gold, swans carved in precious stones, ice-cold fire, and his own celestial bodies. He was a terror to the gods of heaven. When he was asleep or away from the city, the gods took advantage of the situation and killed his army. Enraged, the demon invaded the heaven. The gods, afraid of his magic powers, hid themselves. He could not find them, but they managed to kill his forces at opportune moments. In order to protect his forces, the demon created other three demons, Dāma, Vyāla, and Kaṭa. These three had had no previous incarnation, and hence they were free from every type of mental conditioning. They had no fear, doubt, or other predispositions. They did not flee before the enemy. They were not afraid of death. They did not know the meaning of war, victory, or defeat. In fact, they were not independent jivas at all. They were merely the robot-like working projections of the demon Sambara. Their behavior was like that of one who has eradicated all latent tendencies or conditioning but has not attained enlightenment. The demon Sambara was delighted that his army had invincible protectors. Vasishta continued. The demon Sambara dispatched his invulnerable army protected by the three new demons to fight with the gods. The army of the gods too got ready to fight. The demons were unarmed and they were engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the gods. A fierce battle ensued. Later they fought with all kinds of terrible missiles, destroying all the cities, villages, caves, animals, and others. Each side alternately enjoyed victory and suffered defeat. The three principal demons looked for the principal gods, but they could not be found. The demons went back to Sambara to report to him. The gods prayed to the creator Brahma, who appeared before them at once and begged him to find a way to destroy the three demons. Brahma said, O God, Sambara could not be killed now. He will be killed after 100 years by Lord Vishnu. It is wise for you to retreat from the battle as if defeated by the three demons. In due course, on account of their engagement in this war, the ego sense will arise in them. Then they will be subjected to psychological conditioning and develop latent tendencies. Just now, these three demons are utterly devoid of the ego sense and its adjuncts, conditioning and tendencies. They, in whom the ego sense and its counterpart, the vasanas, do not exist, know neither desire nor anger. They are invincible. He who is bound by the ego sense, that is, I am this body, and by the conditioning of the mind, even if he is regarded as a great man or a man of great learning, can be defeated even by a child. In fact, the notions of I and mine are the eager receptacles which receive sorrow and suffering. He who identifies the body with the self sinks in misery. He who even envisions the self as the omnipresent being overcomes sorrow. To the latter, there is nothing in the three worlds which is not the self and which is to be desired. He whose mind is conditioned can be defeated. In the absence of such conditioning, even a mosquito becomes immortal. The conditioned mind experiences suffering. When rid of the conditioning, it experiences delight. Conditioning or craving weakens a person. Hence, you need not feel anxious to fight these three demons. Do what you can to create in them the feeling of I and mine. Since they are ignorant creatures of the demon, Sambara, they will easily fall for this bait. Then they can be easily defeated by you all. Vasishta continued, having said this, the creator Brahma vanished. The gods rested in their bodies. The gods rested in their abodes for a while in preparation for a fresh onslaught on the demons. The renewed fighting between the armies of the gods and the demons was even more fierce than the previous one. There was a terrible destruction everywhere. This continued involvement in fighting generated in the three demon leaders the basic notion of I am. Even as a mirror reflects an object held close to it, one's behavior reflects as the ego sense in one's consciousness. However, if this behavior is held at a distance from consciousness and there is no identification with such behavior, the ego sense does not arise. Once this ego sense arose, there quickly followed the desire for the prolongation of life in the body, acquisition of wealth, health, pleasure, etc. These desires greatly debilitated their personalities. Then there arose confusion in their minds, which in turn gave rise to feelings of this is mine and this is my body. All these inevitably resulted in inefficiency and inability to do their own work. They were greatly attached to eating and drinking. Objects gave them feelings of pleasure and thus robbed them of their freedom. With the loss of freedom, their courage also went and they experienced fear. They were terribly worried at the very thought, we shall die in this war. The gods took advantage of this situation and began to attack these demons. The three demons who were possessed by fear of death fled. When the demon army saw that their invincible protectors had fled before the invading gods, they were thoroughly demoralized. The demons fell by the thousands. When the demon Sambara heard that this army had been routed by the gods, he was furious. Referring to the three invincible demons, Dāma, Vyāla, and Kaṭa, he demanded, where have they gone? Afraid of his wrath, these three demons took refuge in the nethermost world. There, the servants of the god of death Yama gave them refuge and also three girls to marry. They lived in the netherworld for a long time. One day they were visited by Yama himself, without his paraphernalia. They failed to recognize and honor him. Angered, Yama dispatched them to the most dreadful hells. After suffering there and after a number of incarnations in different subhuman species, they now live as fish in a lake in Kashmir. Vasishta continued, thus you see the disastrous results that arise from non-wisdom. You see how the invincible demons were utterly defeated and disgraced on account of their ego sense, which gave rise to fear in their hearts. The deadly creeper of worldliness sprouts from the seed of the ego sense. Therefore, O Rama, abandon this ego sense with all the strength that lies within, and by being established in the conviction I is nothing, be happy. The one infinite consciousness, which is of the nature of pure bliss, is eclipsed by the shadow of the ego sense. Though the demons Dāma, Vyāla, and Kaṭa were really free from the cycle of birth and death, on account of their ego sense, they had to be subjected to birth and death. They of whom even the gods were afraid are today miserable fish in a lake in Kashmir. Rama asked, Holy Sir, Dāma, Vyāla, and Kaṭa were unreal, having been produced by the magic of Sambara. How was it that they became real entities like us? Vasishta replied, Rama, just as the demons, Dāma, and others were unreal and the products of magic, even so are we and all the gods and others. All these notions of I and you are unreal. That you and I are seen to be real entities does not alter the truth. Even if a dead person appears before you now, he is still dead. However, it is unwise to declare the truth, Brahman alone is real, to the ignorant. For the reality of the world appearance, which has become deep-rooted in the heart of the ignorant, will not be dispelled except through intense inquiry into the purport of the scriptures. One who declares the world is unreal, Brahman alone is real, to such ignorant people is laughed at. However well you explain to them that all this is Brahman, the ignorant cannot comprehend it any more than a corpse can walk. The truth can be experienced only by the wise. O Rama, neither we nor these demons are real. The reality is the one infinite consciousness, which does not undergo any change. In that infinite consciousness, there arise the notions of yourself, myself, these demons, etc. And they are invested with reality because the perceiving consciousness is real. Where this consciousness is awake, as it were, there such notions arise, and where it is asleep, there such notions are dissolved. Yet in the infinite consciousness, there are no such states as awake and asleep. It is but pure consciousness. Realize this and be free from sorrow and fear caused by division. Rama asked, O holy sage, please tell me, when and how will the three demons attain liberation? Vasishta replied, Rama, when they listen to the narration of their story and are reminded of their own essential nature as pure consciousness, they will be liberated. In course of time, there will arise a city named Adhisthana in the middle of the country known as Kashmir. In the center of that city, there will be a hill whose peak will be known as Pradyumna. On top of that hill, there will be a skyscraper. In a corner of that building, the demon Vyāla will be born as a sparrow. In that building, a king known as Yashaskar will reside. The demon Dāma will be born as a mosquito and reside in a hole in one of the pillars of that palace. Elsewhere in that city, there will be a palace known as Ratnavali Vihara, which will be inhabited by the state minister known as Narasimha. The demon Kaṭa will be born as a bird, Maina, and live in that palace. One day that minister Narasimha will recite the story of the three demons, Dāma, Vyāla, and Kaṭa. Listening to it, the Maina will be enlightened. It will recall that its original personality was but a magical creation of the demon Sambara. This recollection will free it from the magic of Sambara. The demon Kaṭa will thus attain nirvana. Other people will recount this story, and the sparrow will also attain liberation after listening to it. Thus will the demon Vyāla attain liberation. In the same way, the mosquito demon Dāma will also listen to this story and will also attain liberation. Such is the story, O Rama, of the three demons Dāma, Vyāla, and Kaṭa, who on account of their ego sins and their cravings fell into hell. All this is nothing more than the play of ignorance and delusion. In fact, it is the pure consciousness that entertains the impure notion of I am, playfully as it were, and without ever renouncing its essential nature as consciousness, experiences the distorted image of itself within itself. Even though this distorted image is truly unreal, the ego sense believes it to be real and gets deluded. Vasishta continued, O Rama, they who are established in the state of liberation as pointed out by the scriptures surely cross this ocean of world appearances as their consciousness flow towards the self. But they who are caught in the net of polemics, which are only productive of sorrow and confusion, forfeit their own highest good. Even in the case of the path shown by the scriptures, only one's direct experience leads one along the safest way to the supreme goal. What else is left of a greedy man except a handful of ashes? But he who looks upon the world as less valuable than a blade of grass never comes to grief. He who has fully realized the infinite is protected by the cosmic deities. Hence, one should not set a foot on the wrong path even in times of great distress. He who has earned a good reputation through a virtuous life gains whatever has not been gained and is rid of misfortune. Only he can be considered a human being who is not complacent with his own virtue, who is devoted to the teaching he has heard and who strives to tread the path of truth. Others are animals in human disguise. He who is filled with milk of human kindness is surely the abode of the Lord Hari. Whatever has to be enjoyed has already been enjoyed. Whatever has to be seen has already been seen. What else is there new in this world which a wise man should seek? Hence, one should be devoted to one's duty as ordained by the scriptures, having given up all craving for pleasure. Adore the saints, this will save you from death. Adhering to the injunctions of the scriptures, one should patiently wait for perfection, which comes in its own time. Arrest the downward trend by studying this holy scripture for liberation. Inquire constantly into the nature of truth. Knowing that this is but a reflection, do not be led by others. Only animals are led by others. Wake up from the slumber of ignorance. Wake up and strive to end old age and death. Wealth is the mother of evil. Sense pleasure is the source of pain. Misfortune is the best fortune. Rejection by all is victory. Life, honor, and noble qualities blossom and attain fruition in one whose conduct and behavior are good and pleasant, who is devoted to seclusion and who does not crave for the pleasures of the world, which lead to suffering. Vasishta continued, O Rama, every zealous effort is always crowned with fruition. Hence do not abandon right effort. Surely it is necessary to weigh the worthiness of the end result before plunging into zealous efforts of any sort. If you carefully investigate in this manner, you will surely discover that self-knowledge alone is capable of utterly destroying all pain and pleasure by their very roots. Hence, zealous effort should be directed towards self-knowledge alone. Get rid of all notions of objectivity created by the pleasure-seeking desire within you. Is there any happiness which is untainted by unhappiness? Both the absence of restraint and the practice of restraint are indeed one in the absolute Brahman, and there is no real division between them. Yet, the practice of restraint bestows great joy and auspiciousness upon you. Hence, resort to self-restraint and give up ego sense. Inquire into the nature of truth and seek the company of the wise. They indeed are good and wise men who live in accordance with the scriptural injunctions and in whom greed, delusion, and anger decrease day by day. In the company of the wise, self-knowledge arises, and at the same time the notion of the reality of the objects of perception as such wanes and eventually vanishes. When the world as object of perception thus fades away, only the supreme truth exists, and the jiva or the individual personality is absorbed in it, as it does not find any object worth clinging to. The world as an object was never created, nor does it exist as such now, nor will it ever be so. It is only the one supreme being that exists at all time as a sole reality. Thus have I explained to you in 1,000 ways the essential unreality of the world as an object of perception. It is nothing but the pure space of consciousness. In it, there is no division which could be referred to as this is the truth and this is not real. The wonderful manifestation of that infinite consciousness alone is regarded as the world, nothing else. In it, the divisions like subject and object and substance and shadow are unwarranted arbitrary assumptions, like the distinctions made between the sun's rays and sunlight. In truth, only the indivisible and unmodified consciousness exists. When in accordance with its own nature it closes and opens its eyes, as it were, there is what is known as dissolution and creation of the universe. Vasishta continued, when it is not rightly understood, the I appears to be an impure notion in the infinite consciousness. But when the I is rightly understood, its meaning is seen as the infinite consciousness. When its own reality is seen, it does not appear as the ego sense anymore, but as the one infinite reality. In fact, there is no distinct entity as I. When this truth is revealed to one with a pure mind, his ignorance is at once dispelled. But others cling to their own false notion like a child clinging to the notion of the existence of a ghost. When the I as a separate entity is thus known to be false, how can one believe in the other notions of heaven, hell, God, etc. that are related to it? Craving for heaven and even for liberation arises in one's heart only as long as the I is seen as an independent entity. As long as the I thus remains, there is only unhappiness in one's life. And this notion of the I cannot be got rid of except through self-knowledge. When one is possessed by this ghost of I-ness, no scriptures, no mantras, nothing enables one to get rid of it. Only by the constant remembrance of the truth that the self is a pure reflection in the infinite consciousness does I-ness cease to grow. The world appearance is a juggler's trick. All subject-object relationship between it and me is foolish. When this understanding takes root, I-ness is uprooted. When it is seen that it is the I that gives rise to the notion of a world, both of them cease in peace. However, the higher form of I-ness, which gives rise to the feeling I am one with the entire universe, there is nothing apart from me, is the understanding of the enlightened person. Another type of I-ness is when one feels that the I is extremely subtle and atomic in nature and therefore different from and independent of everything in this universe. This too is unobjectionable, being conducive to liberation. So let me repeat that again. The higher form of I-ness, which gives rise to the feeling I am one with the entire universe, there is nothing apart from me, is the understanding of the enlightened person. Another type of I-ness, that the I is extremely subtle and atomic in nature and therefore different from and independent of everything in this universe. This too is unobjectionable, being conducive to the inquiry and to liberation. But the I-ness that has been described earlier on is one which identifies the individual self with the body. This is to be abandoned firmly. By the persistent cultivation of the higher form of I-ness, the lower form is eradicated. Having kept the lower I-ness in check, one should resort to the higher form of I-ness, persistently generating in oneself the feeling, I am the all, or I am extremely subtle and independent. In due course, even this form, the higher form of I-ness, should be completely abandoned. Then one may either engage oneself in all activity or remain in seclusion. There is no fear of downfall for him. End of the story of Dāma, Vyāla and Kaṭa.